Pipeline Odyssey, the Z Monologue. Z. To understand the militarization of oil and the dynamism of war machines in War on Terror, one must grasp oil as an ultimate Tellurian lubricant, or a vehicle for epic narratives. To instrumentalize oil through production, to impose any authorial line on this narrative carrier, is like feeding on the devil's excrement, or its derivative. There is always the danger of being poisoned to death, or even worse. In contemporary Islamic references to radical jihad as a global process, the Islamic approach towards the mobilization of tactics is explained as defense as opposed to offense. In the Islamic approach, that is, the way of jihad, Islamic war is delineated by defense, diffusion, and life support contagion, while the crusading war machines, or Western lines of tactics, are mapped on the plane of the offensive, escalation, and militant intrusion. Therefore, the Western incursive dynamism of tactics is always considered un-Islamic, since it perceives war as a manifest dynamic progression of war machines, which inevitably turns into something basically intrusive, because such obsessively dynamic war machines intrinsically transgress and penetrate borders. I exist because I move definitely makes you persona non grata in some places. Such a vigorous dynamism cannot operate remotely or strike the enemy without transgressing borders and territories. The Western Crusade and its approach to war machines cannot be emulated by Islam because its quality of dynamism does not correspond to the laws of Islam and the belief that transgression is idolatrous because all lands and territories belong to the divine, not to war machines or their tactics. For Islamic jihad, everything must operate as a defense. Consequently, the mechanism of the clash is dynamically asymmetrical. This asymmetry is not the asymmetry of warfare, but that of the principles of war itself. If, according to Islam, jihad cannot be transgressive or intrusive and must be conducted merely as pure defense, then how is it possible to uphold the responsibility of making the earth ready for the divine, of making Islam a global religion rather than a Middle Eastern or Afro-Asian cult? The answer lies either in the invention or discovery of new war machines whose means of offense is that of peaceful communication, or in engineering a peaceful and non-transgressive medium or vehicle to host the war machines of jihad. In short, since Western tactics is wedded to crusading fronts, and since jihad must be grasped as a strategic and remote assault on idolatry without manifest transgression, the first task of Islam's politics of militarization is to search for, or to engineer, a dynamic vector or neutral vehicle to smuggle and mobilize Islamic war machines. This medium would be able to replace the dynamism of Western tactics and provide Islamic war machines with a non-transgressive movement. Accordingly, such a dynamic medium or host vehicle can only represent peace. It must be intrinsically disassociated from offense. For this reason, the medium must be part of the nature, or belongs to earth, that is to say, be a neutral third party. For the Islamic side, this non-problematic medium must come from and lead toward the divine. Yet in confrontation with the Western front, it must be politically non-intrusive, neutral, and generous toward capitalism. An entity capable of satisfying both ends is necessarily a natural entity, something from nature, a representative of the planet's sentience. Only as a planetary entity and a natural event can such a medium unproblematically host Islamic war machines. Since tactics, as dynamism or mode of movement, belongs to war machines rather than to the divine, and is connected to human logistics or line of command, jihad can only use a platform of movement which transports war machines naturally, or to be exact, through a property of the divine. There is nothing more appropriate and more relevant here than oil. Islamic apocalypticism has understood well that anything can be pumped into gas pipelines, and oil will slide it forward as well as permanently dissolving it, meaning that whatever reaches the crusading civilizations cannot be extracted or separated from petroleum. Oil cannot be politically distilled. The entities in oil participate in a new chemical compound which cannot be broken into its elements or main constituents. For the other side of the pipeline, or the West, the point of evacuation and consumption, everything in oil remains under constant camouflage, nothing but a petroleum byproduct. The military magic of taking oil as the medium of movement, rather than tactics, unfolds when one claims that oil, as a neutral entity itself, is part of nature and is a planetary entity, hence omnipresent despite different degrees of concentration on Earth. If Islamic war machines are dissolved within oil and oil is an omnipresent planetary entity, then Islamic militarization is not local anymore, but global and planetary. The rise of oil as a medium for the mobilization of war machines heralds the decline of tactical offense and the dawn of a ubiquitous offense embedded within the seemingly peaceful omnipresence of nature. War machines are dissolved in oil. The role of the oil pipeline is not military offense, but life support. The pipeline provides oil as a strategic lube and a neutral vehicle of war machines with a mobile and diffusive effectivity. Oil reaches the crusading fronts through the pipeline. Far corners can be reached by pumping gas in addition to oil into the pipeline. Once oil reaches its destination, the crusading war machines, whose first disposition is to be dynamic, will fuel up and assemble themselves with the oil and its derivatives. As the machines of the Western Enlightenment consume oil, either by burning the blob or fattening up on the blob, the smuggled war machines start to activate and are chemically unbound. The nervous system and the chemistry of war machines, smuggled through oil, infuse with the Western machines feasting on oil unnoticed, as petroleum has already dissolved or refinedly emulsified them in itself, as its chemical elements or its essential derivatives, Islamic ideologies, ambitions, implicit policies, socio-religious entities and formations, etc. These war machines are freighted with strategic lines of Islamic apocalypticism, which fuels and escalates the transgressive impetus of Western war machines, because the divine and its desert can only be reached through participation. The extremist doctrines of jihad discuss how everything functions as a micromanagement towards the provocation of Islamic apocalypticism, and how the kingdom is only constructed on participation. The role of Islamic war machines, then, is to dismantle transgressive Western military dynamism and, at the same time, to incite the Western war machines into escalating their desertifying impetus. In other words, the escalation of Western war machines tends towards liberating the desert of the divine, desert freedom. For jihad, the escalation of Western war machines without adherence to their idolatrous logic of transgression is made possible only by diffusing them within and by way of oil. If Western war machines exhibit a capitalist zeal to waste energy and material, there is no altar better for this wastage than Islamic apocalypse and its divine causes. Now, contaminated by the sentience of oil, as well as by the war machines running through it, Western techno-capitalism, as well as its war machines, and particularly petrophilic entities, are attracted and drawn to an agitated participation with Islamic war machines, Islamic populations, and their lands, which overlap petroleum reservoirs. The disparity and asymmetry between the war machines of the two fronts, of the aggravated appetite for oil building up in Western machines nourished by oil, inclines this participation towards a combustible and conflictive kind of complicity. Correspondingly, jihad's defense and crusades' offensive invasions become as synergetic as they are asymmetrical. As the Western machines are depleted of oil in this heated participation, they rush for thicker layers of the blob, which transport more enthusiastic Islamic war machines with weirder sentience. The more subterranean the logic of oil extraction becomes, the more abysmal oily avatars turn out to be. The pipeline is a superficial carrier of oil and its dissolved entities. Therefore, it is the duty of the crusading machines of enlightenment to fathom deeper levels. The capitalist policy of terminal accessibility or pro-marketism in regard to oil significantly adds to the depth of the blob. Z. In a secret twist, fueled by an enthusiasm more Islamic than Islamic entities themselves, the berserkers of capitalism rush towards Islamic apocalypticism by fusing with its war machines running through oil. When it comes to seeing through the pipeline, machines of enlightenment are particularly petromongoloid. Z. If any movement in a conductive material produces a magnetic field, as in an electric current, then the gas pipeline, where oil and Islamic war machines move, must produce an immense magnetic field of combined strategies between Islam and the earth, swirling and encircling the tube. Z. The Middle East stalks the world as a petrol. Is there anything more Lovecraftian than the building of a new pipeline, winding its blobbing flute? The question is, how long can the cavernous sentients ride in this modern vehicle? Z. Thomas Gould's theory of deep hot biosphere suggests that petroleum is not a fossil fuel, and that oil has its origin in natural gas flows which feed bacteria living in the bowels of the earth. Therefore, the demonarchy of oil is not subjected to the laws of the dead, i.e., the preserved corpses of prehistoric organisms, but rather is animated by a plutonic vitalism, abiogenic petroleum generated by the nether biosphere of the earth. Petroleum surfaces from primordial origins. Thus, it is not of the earth, but of the outside, planted here as a xeno-chemical insider. Oil is produced by plutonic forces and the nether biosphere, rather than from the decomposition of fossils and organic body counts. Consequently, oil is far more substantial and follows a different, autonomous logic of planetary distribution. Taking Gould's theory as petro-political ground has a different and far more strategic impact on the aforementioned pipeline scenario. If oil is somehow undying, then so also are the war machines dissolved in it, until such time as they accomplish their task, one on behalf of the insider and the earth, the other on behalf of monotheism and the divine. Z. Yes. In short, oil trade in the Islamic network of petropolitics is primarily used to recharge and benefit neither the wealth of countries nor the production spheres, but the pipeline itself.